The frail old woman, lost, feverish, and dying under the Manhattan Bridge, was invisible to thousands of New Yorkers for 5 days. But only one person stopped, a 15-year-old boy with torn sneakers and an empty stomach. He gave her his half sandwich and water, wrapped her in his only jacket, and even brought her to his shelter to keep her alive. What he didn't know was this: the confused, collapsing woman he cradled like family was the mother of one of New York's most powerful men. And when the billionaire found the boy who saved his mother, he made a choice that would change both their lives forever. Before we dive into this story, let us know where you're watching from. We'd love to hear your thoughts. The words came soft and hoarse, barely cutting through the rumble of delivery trucks crossing the Manhattan Bridge overhead. "Please, ma'am, just a bite." Daniel Hayes, 15 years old, crouched beside the frail woman slumped against the graffiti-covered concrete pillar. His jeans were torn at the knees, his jacket 2 sizes too big, salvaged from a donation bin months back. But in his calloused hands he held half a turkey sandwich, still wrapped in deli paper, the edges worn from being carried in his backpack all day. The woman's eyes were milky, unfocused, her clothes hung loose on her frame, and her gray hair stuck to her forehead in matted clumps. She looked like she had been invisible for so long that even she had forgotten her own name. Daniel had been living under this bridge for 8 months now, ever since he walked out of Riverside Youth Home with nothing but his backpack and $23. The home wasn't cruel in the obvious ways. No one hit him, no one starved him. But it was a place where kids became numbers, where staff rotated too fast to remember your face, where the older boys stole what little you had and the system just kept moving, indifferent as a factory line. He had been there for almost 3 years, since the day his Aunt Catherine dropped him off with a tight smile and a promise to visit that never came. Before that, he had lived with her for nearly 2 years after the accident that took his parents. His mom and dad had died in a pileup on the interstate when Daniel was 9 years old. Catherine, his father's sister, had taken him in with obvious reluctance. She gave him a room, fed him, but never spoke to him unless necessary. She made it clear he was an obligation, not family. Then one day, when he was 12, she told him she was moving to London for work. There was no room for him. She drove him to Riverside and left him there, promising the social worker she would stay in touch. She never did, so at 14 and a half, Daniel walked out. He found work washing dishes at a diner in Chinatown, bussing tables at a sports bar in the financial district, anything that paid cash under the table. He learned to move invisible through the city, to sleep in shifts, to save every dollar in a coffee can buried beneath a loose piece of plywood near the bridge support. But he never walked past someone who needed help. "Come on," he urged gently, pressing the sandwich into the woman's trembling hands. "You gotta eat something." She took it, her fingers shaking so badly the bread nearly fell apart. She bit into it slowly, chewing like it hurt. Daniel watched her, his own stomach growling. That sandwich was supposed to be his dinner, but he had learned a long time ago that hunger was easier to carry when you knew someone else wasn't starving. "Good," he said quietly, pulling a bottle of water from his backpack. "Now drink." She sipped, coughed, then sipped again. Her eyes cleared just a fraction, and for a moment, she looked at him, really looked at him. "Thank you," she rasped. Daniel nodded. "What's your name?" She blinked, confused, as though the question was in a foreign language. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Then her eyes went distant again, lost in whatever fog had swallowed her mind. Daniel sat back on his heels, studying her. She wasn't just homeless, something was wrong. The way her eyes wandered, the way she didn't seem to know where she was. He had seen people like this before on the streets. Lost, confused, vulnerable. "It's okay," he said softly, "you don't have to remember right now." He stayed with her for the next hour, watching the afternoon fade into evening. People walked past, business people in suits, tourists with cameras, students with headphones. Not one of them stopped. Not one of them even looked. Daniel knew that feeling. The invisibility, the sense that you could disappear and no one would notice or care. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Daniel made a decision. The temperature was dropping. The woman was wearing only a thin cardigan over her dress, no coat, no layers. Her shoes were worn through at the soles. She wouldn't survive the night out here. "Ma'am," he said gently, touching her shoulder. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" Her eyes opened slowly. "It's getting cold. You can't stay here. Do you have somewhere to go?" She stared at him blankly. "A home, family, anyone?" "Nothing, just that empty, confused gaze." Daniel's chest tightened. He knew that look. It was the same look he had seen in the mirror after his aunt left him at Riverside. The look of someone who had been abandoned, forgotten, cast aside. "Okay," he said, making his decision. "Okay, you're coming with me." He helped her to her feet, his arms supporting her frail body. She was so light, like holding a bundle of sticks wrapped in cloth. He moved slowly, letting her find her balance, whispering encouragement. "That's it. One step. Good. Another one. You're doing great." They made their way down the street, Daniel supporting most of her weight. People stared, but no one offered to help. A woman clutched her purse tighter as they passed. A man crossed to the other side of the street. Daniel ignored them. He had learned long ago that most people didn't want to see suffering. It made them uncomfortable, forced them to confront things they'd rather ignore. It took them nearly 20 minutes to walk the 3 blocks back to the bridge. By the time they arrived, the woman was breathing hard, her face pale with exhaustion. "Almost there," Daniel encouraged. "Just a little further." His shelter was tucked beneath one of the massive concrete supports, hidden from casual view by a chain-link fence with a gap at the bottom. He had discovered it 6 months ago, a dry patch protected from the wind and rain by the bridge deck above. He had made it as comfortable as possible. Sheets of plywood formed a floor, keeping him off the cold concrete. Flattened cardboard boxes lined the walls for insulation. A blue tarp, salvaged from a construction site, stretched overhead to catch any water that dripped through the bridge joints. An old sleeping bag, threadbare but clean, served as his bed. A milk crate held his few possessions, extra socks, a flashlight with dying batteries, a paperback book he had found in a trash can, the coffee can with his savings. It wasn't much, but it was his. "Here," he said, guiding the woman through the gap in the fence. "Watch your head." He lowered her carefully onto the sleeping bag, arranging her as gently as possible. She lay back with a soft sigh, her eyes already closing. "Wait," Daniel said. "You need to drink more." He held the water bottle to her lips, tilting it carefully. She drank a few sips, then turned her head away. "Tired," she mumbled. "I know, but you're safe now, I promise." He pulled off his jacket, the only warm thing he owned, and draped it over her like a blanket. The October evening air bit through his thin t-shirt immediately, but he ignored it. She needed it more than he did. For a long moment, he just watched her, this stranger he had brought into his shelter. He didn't know her name, didn't know her story. But he knew she was alone, just like him. "I won't leave you," he whispered. "Not like everyone else did." He sat beside her, hugging his knees to his chest, trying to preserve what warmth he had left. The city rumbled and hummed around them, cars on the bridge overhead, sirens in the distance, voices carried on the wind. But here, in this small pocket of shelter, they were safe. The woman's breathing evened out, her chest rising and falling steadily. Daniel pulled his backpack closer, using it as a pillow, and tried to settle in for the night. But sleep wouldn't come. He was too cold, too worried. What if she got sicker? What if she needed medicine? What if she didn't wake up? Around midnight, she began to stir. Her breathing grew ragged, and she made small sounds of distress. Daniel sat up quickly. "Hey, you okay?" She thrashed weakly, her hands reaching for something invisible. "Shiz, it's okay. You're safe." He took her hand, holding it gently. "I'm here." She calmed at his touch, her breathing settling. But her skin was burning hot, fever radiating through her thin frame. Daniel's worry deepened. He had no money for medicine, no way to call a doctor. All he could do was stay with her, keep her as comfortable as possible, and hope. He spent the night sitting beside her, dozing fitfully, waking every time she moved or made a sound. He gave her water whenever she was conscious enough to drink. He adjusted the jacket when it slipped. He wiped sweat from her forehead with the cleanest shirt he had. "You're going to be okay," he told her, over and over. "You're not alone, I'm right here." As dawn broke, pale and gray, Daniel looked at her in the growing light. She seemed worse, her skin had a grayish tinge, her breathing more labored. Fear gripped him. What if she died here? What if his help wasn't enough? Please don't die, he whispered. Please, I know what it's like to be forgotten. I can't let you die alone. The first day blurred into the second, then the third. Daniel stopped going to his dishwashing job at the diner. He couldn't leave her, not like this. He used almost all his saved money to buy what little he could: crackers, canned soup he heated over a small camping stove he had found in a dumpster, more water, a thin blanket from a thrift store that cost $8 he couldn't afford to spend. The woman drifted in and out of consciousness. When she was awake, she was confused, calling out names Daniel didn't recognize. Robert, where's Robert? Have you seen my keys? I need to get to the meeting. It's okay, Daniel would say softly, each time. Just rest, you're safe. He learned to be patient during these episodes, to speak calmly, to not push. She was somewhere else in her mind, somewhere Daniel couldn't follow. All he could do was anchor her to the present, with his voice, his presence. On the morning of the fourth day, he woke to find her watching him. For the first time her eyes were clear, truly clear, focused and aware. Who are you? She asked, her voice hoarse but lucid. Daniel sat up quickly. My name's Daniel. I found you 4 days ago, over on Pearl Street. You were sick, so I brought you here. She looked around, taking in the makeshift shelter, the cardboard walls, the blue tarp overhead. Where is here? Under the Manhattan Bridge. It's where I live. Her brow furrowed. You're a child. I'm 15. 15. She closed her eyes, pain crossing her face. And you live under a bridge. It's not so bad, better than some places I've been. She opened her eyes again, studying him more carefully now. You've been taking care of me. Yes, ma'am. Why? The question caught him off guard. Because you needed help. And nobody else was stopping. Tears welled in her eyes. What's your name again? Daniel. Daniel Hayes. Daniel. She repeated it like she was committing it to memory. I'm Margaret. It's nice to meet you, Margaret. He reached for the water bottle. You should drink something. She let him help her sit up, wincing with the effort. She drank slowly, carefully, then lay back exhausted. I have dementia, she said quietly. I get confused, I wander. I don't know how I got here. Daniel's chest tightened. That's okay, the important thing is you're safe now. Safe. She laughed, but it was bitter. A 15-year-old homeless child is keeping me safe under a bridge. What has my life become? You're alive, Daniel said firmly. That's what matters. She looked at him for a long moment, something shifting in her expression. How long have I been here? 4 days, 4 days. Her hand flew to her mouth. Oh God, James, my son. He must be looking for me. Do you know how to reach him? Her face crumpled. I can't remember his number. I used to know it by heart, but now, she pressed her palms against her temples. It's gone. Everything's gone. It's okay, Daniel said quickly. Don't push, maybe it'll come back. But as the day wore on, Margaret grew more agitated. She kept trying to remember, muttering numbers that went nowhere, names that didn't connect. Her frustration fed her confusion, and by evening she had slipped back into the fog. Daniel stayed close, speaking softly, trying to keep her calm. But inside, his worry grew. She needed real help, doctors, medicine, her family. He was just a kid with a camping stove and a tarp. He couldn't save her alone. That night, as he sat beside her sleeping form, Daniel felt the weight of helplessness pressing down on him. He had done everything he could think of, and it wasn't enough. Please, he whispered into the dark. Please let her remember. Please let me help her. The 5th day dawned cold and damp. A light rain fell, pattering against the tarp above them. Margaret was worse. Her fever had spiked again, and she barely woke when Daniel tried to give her water. He was running out of options, and time. Around noon, desperation drove him to make a decision. He left Margaret sleeping, and walked to a nearby church he had passed many times. The doors were unlocked, the sanctuary empty and quiet. Daniel hadn't prayed, really prayed, since his parents died, but now he knelt in the back pew, and clasped his hands together. God, if you're listening, I need help. There's this woman, Margaret, and she's really sick. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to save her. Please, Please don't let her die. She's somebody's mom. Somebody's looking for her. Please help me figure out how to get her home. He stayed there for several minutes, tears streaming down his face, feeling the enormity of his powerlessness. When he returned to the bridge, Margaret was awake, barely. Her eyes were glassy with fever, her lips cracked and dry. "Daniel," she breathed. "I'm here." He knelt beside her, taking her hand. "James," she said, her grip suddenly tightening with surprising strength. "My son, James. I know, you told me. His number." Her eyes focused just for a moment, fighting through the fog. 646. Daniel scrambled for his phone, his hands shaking. "Say it again, slowly." 646. 555. She paused, her face scrunched with concentration. 0123. Daniel typed each digit into his phone, as she spoke, his heart pounding. "Is that it? Is that the whole number?" Yes, that's it." She fell back, exhausted from the effort. Daniel stared at the number on his cracked screen. 10 digits, a lifeline. "Okay," he said, his voice shaking. "Okay, I'm going to call him. You're going to go home, Margaret. You're going to be safe." He stood, walking to the edge of the shelter where the signal was stronger. His battery was at 18%, he had one shot at this. His thumb hovered over the call button. What if this wasn't the right number? What if her son didn't believe him? What if her son didn't believe him? What if— No, he couldn't think like that. He had to try. He pressed call. The phone rang, once, twice, 3 times. "Please answer. Please." On the 4th ring, a man's voice came through, strained and exhausted. "Hello?" Daniel's mouth went dry. "Is this James Cartwright?" A pause. "Who is this?" "My name is Daniel Hayes. I found your mother. Margaret. She's with me under the Manhattan Bridge, and she's really sick. She gave me your number. She said you're her son." Silence, but Daniel could hear breathing, rapid and sharp. "Are you there?" Daniel pressed, panic rising. "Please, she needs help. Where exactly are you?" James's voice had changed completely, no longer wary, but urgent, almost desperate. "Tell me exactly where you are." "Right now, under the Manhattan Bridge, Brooklyn side. There's a chain-link fence with a gap at the bottom, near the support pillar, with the red graffiti. We're behind that." "Is she conscious?" "Barely. She has a really high fever. She's been getting worse. I'm coming right now. Do not leave her. Do you understand me? Stay with her." "I won't leave her. I promise." "How long has she been missing? When did you find her?" 5 days ago. "I've been taking care of her, but I don't know what else to do. She needs a doctor." 5 days. James's voice cracked. "Oh God, we've been searching everywhere. Police, private investigators, everyone." 5 days. Daniel heard sounds in the background, movement, voices, urgency. "I'm sorry," Daniel said, tears streaming down his face. "I'm sorry I didn't call sooner. I didn't know the number until just now." "She couldn't remember. You saved her life," James interrupted, his voice fierce. "Whatever happens, you saved her life. I'm 15 minutes away. Don't let her sleep. Keep her awake. Talk to her. Can you do that?" Yes, I can do that." "Good. I'm on my way." The line went dead. Daniel ran back to Margaret, falling to his knees beside her. Margaret, wake up. Your son is coming. James is coming." Her eyes fluttered open. "You have to stay awake, okay? Just a little longer. He's almost here." "James," she whispered. "Yes, he's coming to take you home, but you have to stay with me until he gets here." Daniel talked to her non-stop for the next 15 minutes. He told her about his parents, about the good memories he had before the accident. He told her about the books he liked to read, the dreams he used to have about becoming a teacher. He told her anything and everything, his voice a lifeline pulling her back every time her eyes started to close. "Stay with me, Margaret. Please stay with me." Then he heard it, the roar of an engine, closer than the usual traffic, tires on gravel, a door slamming. "Here," Daniel shouted, crawling to the gap in the fence. "We're here." A tall man appeared, his expensive suit rumpled, his face pale with fear and exhaustion. His eyes were red-rimmed, his hair disheveled. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. James Cartwright dropped to his knees at the fence, staring at Daniel. Where is she? Inside. Through here. Daniel scrambled back, and James followed, squeezing through the gap with urgent clumsiness. When James saw Margaret lying on the sleeping bag, wrapped in Daniel's jacket and the threadbare blanket, his composure shattered. "Mom!" His voice broke on the word. He rushed to her side, gathering her into his arms with infinite care. "Mom, it's me. It's James. I'm here." Her eyes opened, and for a moment clarity returned. "James." "Yes, Mama, I've got you. You're safe now." Tears streamed down his face as he held her, this powerful man reduced to a frightened son cradling his mother. Daniel stood back, suddenly feeling like an intruder in this private moment, but James looked up at him, his expression full of gratitude and something else, awe. "You're Daniel." "Yes, sir. You've been taking care of her." Daniel nodded. "I tried. I'm sorry I couldn't do more. You kept her alive." James's voice was thick with emotion. "For 5 days, you kept her alive. Do you understand what that means?" Daniel didn't know what to say. James turned back to his mother, speaking urgently. "We're going to get you to a hospital, right now." He lifted her carefully, standing with her in his arms. She weighed so little, but he held her like she was made of glass. At the fence, James's driver appeared, a man in a dark suit who took in the scene with wide eyes. "Get the door," James ordered. "We're going to Mount Sinai. Now." The driver ran ahead, and James turned back to Daniel one more time. "Come with us." Daniel blinked. "What?" "You're coming to the hospital. The doctors need to know everything. What she ate, how long she's been sick, all of it." James's expression was fierce. "And I need to know who you are, why you did this. You're not staying under this bridge. Not tonight." "I don't." "That wasn't a request." James's tone left no room for argument. "You saved my mother. The least I can do is make sure you're safe. Now come on." Daniel grabbed his backpack, everything he owned stuffed inside, and followed James through the gap in the fence. A black SUV waited, its engine running. James climbed into the back seat, still holding Margaret. Daniel hesitated at the door. "Get in," James said. Daniel climbed in, perching on the edge of the leather seat. The door closed, and the SUV pulled away from the curb with urgent speed. Inside, Margaret lay across the seat, her head on James's lap. He stroked her hair, whispering to her, "You're okay now. I've got you. We're going to fix this." Daniel sat across from them, his backpack clutched to his chest, hardly daring to breathe. James looked at him, really looked at him, taking in the torn clothes, the thin frame, the worn shoes, but his expression wasn't judgment or pity. It was gratitude mixed with something deeper. "How old are you?" James asked quietly. 15. "And you've been living under that bridge?" 8 months. James's jaw tightened. 15 years old, taking care of my mother, when hundreds of adults walked right past her. I couldn't leave her. Daniel said simply. "I know what it feels like when nobody stops." Something in James's expression shifted then, softened. He extended his hand across the space between them. "Thank you, Daniel. From the bottom of my heart, thank you." Daniel took his hand, shaking it carefully. The handshake felt like more than gratitude. It felt like a promise, though Daniel didn't yet understand what kind. As the SUV raced through the streets of Manhattan, sirens wailing in the distance, Daniel looked at Margaret, this woman he had cared for, worried over, refused to abandon. She was going home, and somehow, in ways he couldn't yet comprehend, his life was about to change forever. The emergency room was chaos. Nurses shouted orders, machines beeped in urgent rhythms, fluorescent lights buzzed overhead with an intensity that made Daniel's eyes ache. He stood frozen just inside the automatic doors, overwhelmed by the brightness, the noise, the sterile smell of antiseptic that seemed to coat the back of his throat. James carried Margaret through the entrance, his voice cutting through the commotion like a blade. "I need help. My mother, she's severely dehydrated. High fever, possible pneumonia." A trauma team swarmed them immediately, transferring Margaret onto a gurney. James walked beside her, rattling off information while doctors fired questions at him. "How long has she been missing?" 5 days. "Any known medical conditions?" "Dementia diagnosed 3 years ago. She's on medication, but she hasn't had it in days." Daniel lingered near the wall, unsure if he was supposed to follow or stay behind. He felt like an intruder in this clean, efficient world. A nurse glanced at him, her eyes narrowing as she took in his dirty clothes and worn sneakers. "Sir," she said, addressing James, "the boy can't be back here. This is family only." James turned, his voice firm and brooking no argument. "He is family. He's the one who kept my mother alive for 5 days. He needs to be here." The nurse hesitated, clearly wanting to protest, then nodded curtly. "Fine, but he stays out of the way." Daniel felt every stare in the hallway burning into him as they moved deeper into the hospital. He saw the judgment in people's eyes, the wondering how a kid who looked like him had ended up with someone like James Cartwright. Some looked at him with pity, others with suspicion. He wanted to disappear. They followed the gurney into a private emergency room. Margaret was immediately hooked up to monitors, an IV line threaded into her arm, oxygen mask placed over her face. Her chest rose and fell in rapid, shallow movements. James stood at her bedside, his hand gripping hers, his expensive suit rumpled and creased. For the first time, the powerful businessman looked small, vulnerable, almost lost. Daniel hung back near the door, his arms wrapped around his backpack. He felt like he shouldn't be here, shouldn't witness this private moment of fear. "Daniel," James's voice was quiet, "come here." Slowly, Daniel approached. James gestured to the chair beside the bed. "Sit. You've been taking care of her. She'd want you here." Daniel sat carefully, his hands folded tightly in his lap. Margaret stirred, her eyes fluttering open behind the oxygen mask. When she saw him, a faint smile touched her lips. "You're still here," she whispered, her voice muffled by the mask. "Yeah," Daniel said softly. "I'm not going anywhere." James watched them, something unreadable flickering across his face. Then he turned to the doctor who had just entered, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a serious expression. "How is she, Dr. Patel?" The doctor's face was grave. "Severe dehydration, significant weight loss, pneumonia in both lungs. Her body is weak, Mr. Cartwright. Very weak. We're doing everything we can, but the next 24 to 48 hours are critical." James's voice cracked. "Will she make it?" Dr. Patel hesitated. "I can't make promises, but we're giving her aggressive treatment, fluids, antibiotics, oxygen support. She's in the best hands possible. What can I do?" "Be here, talk to her, let her know she's not alone." An alarm suddenly shrieked from the monitor. Margaret's body convulsed, her back arching off the bed. The oxygen saturation numbers plummeted. "She's crashing," a nurse shouted. "Get the crash cart." James was pushed back as the medical team swarmed the bed. Daniel stood frozen, his heart pounding so hard he thought it might break through his ribs. The world seemed to slow down, every sound sharp and terrible. The snap of the defibrillator charging, the shouted commands, the flat line on the monitor screaming its awful monotone. "Clear." Dr. Patel's voice rang out. Margaret's body jerked. The line stayed flat. Again, "Clear." Another jolt. Daniel's hands were pressed together so tightly his knuckles had gone white. He whispered under his breath, "Please don't take her. Please don't take her. Please don't take her. Please." The monitor beeped, once, then again, then settled into a rhythm. "We've got her back," Dr. Patel said, her voice tight with controlled relief. "Let's get her stabilized." The team worked quickly, adjusting IVs, checking vitals, speaking in clipped medical shorthand that Daniel couldn't follow. After what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, Dr. Patel turned to James. "She's stable for now, but this was very close. Her body is fighting hard, but it's exhausted." James exhaled a shuddering breath, his hands shaking as he ran them through his hair. He turned to Daniel, and for the first time, Daniel saw tears glistening in the man's eyes. James quickly wiped them away, but not before Daniel noticed. "She's still here," Daniel said quietly. "That's what matters." James nodded, unable to speak. The hours that followed blurred together. James paced, made phone calls, signed forms. Daniel sat quietly in the corner, sometimes dozing, sometimes staring at Margaret's monitors, watching the numbers that meant she was still alive. Nurses came and went. Some smiled at Daniel. Others ignored him. One brought him a sandwich and a juice box, which he accepted gratefully, even though guilt gnawed at him for eating when Margaret couldn't. At one point, James sat down beside him, exhaustion written in every line of his face. What's your name? Your full name? Daniel James Hayes. How old are you, Daniel? 15. Almost 16. And your parents? The question was a knife, sharp and sudden. Daniel looked away, his jaw tight. Dead. Car accident when I was 9. I'm sorry. James's voice was genuine. Who's been taking care of you? Daniel shrugged, the gesture trying to be casual but failing. Nobody really. My aunt took me in for a couple years but then she moved to London. Dumped me at Riverside Youth Home when I was 12. I stayed there almost 3 years then I left. Why did you leave? Because it wasn't. Daniel struggled to find the words. It wasn't safe. The older kids, they'd steal your stuff, hurt you if you didn't do what they wanted. The staff didn't care. They were just there for a paycheck. So I figured I'd take my chances on my own. How long have you been on the streets? 8 months. James was silent for a long moment, his expression darkening. You've been living under that bridge for 8 months. It's not so bad, better than Riverside anyway. I got work, save money. I'm making it. You're 15 years old, James said quietly. You shouldn't have to make it on your own. Daniel didn't know how to respond to that. In his world, you either made it or you didn't. Nobody was coming to save you. James leaned back in his chair, studying Daniel carefully. You saved my mother's life. You fed her, kept her warm, called me when she needed help. Most people would have walked right past her. Daniel shrugged again. I couldn't just leave her there. I know what it's like when nobody stops. How do you mean? Daniel hesitated, then said quietly, after my parents died, I felt invisible. Like I didn't matter. My aunt made me feel that way too, like I was just a burden she had to carry until she could get rid of me. When I got to Riverside, it was even worse. You're just a number there. Nobody knows your name. Nobody cares if you're hurting or scared or hungry. So when I saw your mom sitting there all alone, his voice trailed off. I couldn't let her be invisible too. James's throat worked as he swallowed hard. He looked at Daniel with an intensity that made the boy uncomfortable. You're not going back to that bridge, James said finally. Not tonight, not ever. Daniel's heart stuttered. You don't have to. I know I don't have to, James interrupted. But I'm telling you, you're not going back there. You saved my mother. That means something. It means you matter. And I'm not going to let you sleep on concrete when I have rooms sitting empty. Daniel wanted to believe him, but he had learned to protect himself from hope. Hope hurt when it was taken away. People say stuff like that, he said carefully. But they don't mean it. Not really. I mean it, James said, his voice steady and certain. I promise you, Daniel, you're not going back. At dawn, Dr. Patel returned. Her expression was cautiously optimistic. She's stable. The antibiotics are working, and her vitals are improving. She's not out of danger yet, but she's fighting. You can see her, one at a time. James looked at Daniel. You should go first. Daniel blinked in surprise. Me? But she's your mom. And you're the one who saved her. Go on. Daniel stood slowly, his legs stiff from sitting so long. He walked into the room where Margaret lay, her face pale but peaceful, her chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm. He approached the bed carefully, almost afraid he might disturb her. But when he reached for her hand, her eyes opened. Daniel, she whispered, her voice hoarse but clear. You're still here. I said I wouldn't leave. He squeezed her hand gently. You're doing better. The doctor says you're fighting. Because of you. Her eyes filled with tears. You're my angel, Daniel. God sent you to me. Daniel's throat tightened. I just gave you a sandwich. No, she said firmly as her weak voice could manage. You gave me hope. You reminded me I wasn't forgotten. James appeared in the doorway watching them. When Margaret saw him, she smiled. My 2 boys, she whispered. And in that moment, something shifted. Something fragile but real settled into place, connecting the 3 of them in ways none of them fully understood yet. Daniel looked at James, then at Margaret, and for the first time in 6 years, he let himself believe that maybe he wasn't alone anymore. 3 days later, Margaret was stable enough to be discharged. The doctors gave strict instructions for her care, medications, rest, follow-up appointments, and James hired a private nurse to help during the transition. As they prepared to leave the hospital, James turned to Daniel, who had barely left Margaret's side, except to shower in the hospital's family bathroom and change into clean clothes. James had bought him. "You're coming home with us," James said. It wasn't a question. Daniel hesitated, his old instincts screaming warnings. "I should probably get back. I have a job at the diner, and I already called them." James interrupted, explained the situation. They understood. "You called my job?" Daniel's eyes widened. "I did, and I told them you wouldn't be coming back, because you'd be going to school instead." James's tone was matter-of-fact, like this was already decided. Daniel felt panic rising in his chest. "I can't just go to school. I need to work. I need money." "For what?" James asked calmly. "You'll have a place to live. Food, clothes, everything you need. You're 15, Daniel. You should be in school, not washing dishes for cash under the table. You don't understand." "I understand that you've been taking care of yourself since you were 14, James said, his voice softening. "And you've done an incredible job, but you don't have to do it anymore. Let someone take care of you for once." Daniel looked at Margaret, who was being wheeled toward them by a nurse. She reached out her hand, and he took it. "Please come home with us," she said softly. "I don't want you to be alone anymore." Every logical part of Daniel's brain told him not to trust this. But when he looked into Margaret's kind eyes, something in him broke. "Okay," he whispered. "Okay." The townhouse loomed before Daniel like something from a dream. 5 stories of red brick and tall windows, with wrought iron balconies and a glossy black door that probably cost more than he had made in his entire life. A doorman in a neat uniform stood at attention. Daniel climbed out of the SUV slowly, his new duffel bag, provided by James, slung over his shoulder. He stared up at the building, his stomach twisting into knots. "This is where you live?" he asked, his voice small. James nodded, helping Margaret out of the car. "It's just a house, Daniel. Nothing to be afraid of." But Daniel was afraid, not of the house itself, but of what it represented. A world he didn't belong in. A world that would eventually reject him. Inside, the foyer took his breath away. Marble floors gleamed under a crystal chandelier that scattered light like diamonds. A spiral staircase curved upward, its polished banister gleaming. Paintings in gilded frames lined the walls, real art, not prints. Daniel froze just inside the door, his worn sneakers squeaking on the marble. A woman appeared from a side hallway, her gray hair pulled back in a neat bun, her face warm and welcoming. She wore simple clothes, slacks and a cardigan, but carried herself with quiet dignity. "You must be Daniel," she said with a genuine smile. "I'm Mrs. Lopez, I manage the house, welcome." Daniel nodded, his voice caught in his throat. "Hi, let me show you to your room," James said, gesturing toward the stairs. They climbed to the 3rd floor, past more paintings and elegant furniture. James opened a door at the end of the hallway, and Daniel stepped inside. The room was bigger than any place he had ever lived. A large bed with a thick comforter, and mountains of pillows, sat against one wall. A desk with a lamp stood by the window, which overlooked the street below. A bookshelf waited empty. A closet stood open, bare hangers waiting. "This is yours," James said, "for as long as you need it." Daniel set his duffel bag down carefully, his hands shaking. "It's too much." "It's enough," James corrected gently. "You deserve a safe place, Daniel. A place that's yours." Daniel walked to the window, looking out at the city. From here he could see the lights starting to come on as evening approached. Somewhere out there was the bridge where he had slept for 8 months. It felt like another lifetime. "I don't know how to do this," he admitted quietly. "Do what?" "Live like this. Be normal." "I don't know the rules here." James stepped beside him. "There's only one rule, be yourself. Everything else we'll figure out together." That night, Daniel lay in the enormous bed, stiff and uncomfortable. The mattress was too soft, the sheets too clean, the room too quiet. He kept his duffel bag beside him, his fingers gripping the strap even in his half-sleep. He was used to the rumble of traffic overhead, the distant sound of sirens, the feeling of cold concrete beneath him. This softness, this silence, it felt wrong, like a costume that didn't fit. He whispered into the dark, "Please don't let this be temporary." The next morning, sunlight streamed through windows Daniel had forgotten to close. He woke confused, momentarily forgetting where he was. Then the events of the past days came rushing back. He dressed in the new clothes James had bought, jeans that actually fit, a plain gray t-shirt, socks without holes, and made his way downstairs. The smell of coffee and bacon led him to a large kitchen where Mrs. Lopez was cooking and humming to herself. She smiled when she saw him. "Good morning, Daniel. Sit. Breakfast will be ready in a minute." He sat at the kitchen island, watching her work. Soon she placed a plate in front of him, scrambled eggs, bacon, toast, and a glass of orange juice. Daniel stared at it, overwhelmed. "This is all for me." "Of course, sweetheart. Eat up. You need your strength." He ate slowly, savoring every bite. Real eggs, cooked perfectly, crispy bacon, warm toast with butter melting into it. He couldn't remember the last time he had eaten a breakfast like this, maybe not since before his parents died. James entered, already dressed in a suit, his phone in one hand and a coffee cup in the other. He sat across from Daniel. "How'd you sleep?" Daniel shrugged. "Okay, I guess. The bed's really soft, you'll get used to it." James set his phone down. "I need to go into the office today, but I'll be back by dinner. Mrs. Lopez will be here, and so will Margaret's nurse. You're free to explore the house, watch TV, whatever you want." "I could help Mrs. Lopez," Daniel offered. "I'm good at cleaning." "I used to," Daniel. James interrupted gently. "You don't have to earn your place here, you just have to be here. Understand?" Daniel nodded, though he didn't really understand. In his experience, everything came with a price. Nothing was free. After James left, Daniel spent the morning awkwardly navigating the house. Everything felt too nice to touch. He was afraid he would break something or leave a mark, or somehow ruin this perfect clean world. Around noon, Margaret called for him. He found her in a sunny sitting room, wrapped in a blanket, looking much better than she had at the hospital. "Come sit with me," she said, patting the chair beside her. Daniel sat, and she took his hand. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Better, thanks to you." She studied his face. "But you look worried. What's wrong?" Daniel struggled to find the words. "I don't belong here, Mrs. Cartwright. I'm gonna mess something up." "And then what?" she asked gently. "You think we'll throw you out. People always do." Margaret squeezed his hand. "Not us, Daniel. We're not like the others. James and I, we keep our promises." "How do you know? You barely know me." "I know enough," she said firmly. "I know you gave me your food when you were hungry. I know you kept me warm when you were cold. I know you called for help when you could have just walked away. That tells me everything I need to know about who you are." Daniel's eyes burned with tears. He refused to let fall. "What if I'm not good enough?" "Oh, sweetheart." Margaret cupped his face with her frail hand. "You already are." That afternoon, Daniel sat with her while she dozed. He found a book on the shelf, an old copy of To Kill a Mockingbird, and started reading. He had read it once in school, back before everything fell apart, and he remembered liking it. When James came home that evening, he found them like that, Margaret sleeping peacefully, Daniel reading quietly beside her. "She likes having you here," James said softly. "She's calmer when you're around." Daniel looked up. "Really? Really? You remind her that the world still has good people in it." James sat down across from them. "Daniel, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest." Daniel tensed. Here it comes, he thought. The catch. "What happened to your aunt? Catherine, right?" Daniel's jaw tightened. "What about her? Why did she leave you at Riverside?" "She said she got a job opportunity in London. Said she couldn't take me with her. Said the home would be better for me anyway, that I'd have structures and supervision." Daniel's voice was bitter. "What she meant was she didn't want me anymore." "Did she ever visit?" "No, she promised she would, but she never did. Not once in almost 3 years." James leaned back, his expression dark. "Where is she now?" "I don't know. I don't care." "You might need to care," James said carefully. "Because legally, she's still your guardian, and if I'm going to help you, really help you, we need to deal with that." Daniel's stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" "I mean I want to become your legal guardian, Daniel. I want to make this permanent. But to do that, we need to either get her permission, or prove she abandoned you." Daniel felt like the floor had disappeared beneath him. "You want to be my guardian? Like officially?" "Yes, if that's what you want too." Daniel stared at him, hardly daring to believe it. "Why? Why would you do that?" James met his gaze steadily. "Because you saved my mother's life. because you deserve better than sleeping under bridges, and because," he paused, "because when I look at you, I see someone worth fighting for." Daniel's breath caught. No one had ever said anything like that to him before. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll think about it," James said, "and in the meantime, you're staying here. That's non-negotiable." That night, Daniel lay in bed staring at the ceiling. For the first time in years, the future didn't look like an endless stretch of uncertainty and survival. It looked like possibility. He whispered into the dark, "Thank you," and somewhere in the house, he heard Margaret's voice, faint but clear, saying good night to her nurse, saying she was grateful, saying she was blessed. Daniel closed his eyes, and for the first time in 6 years, felt like maybe he was blessed too. 4 weeks passed. 4 weeks of Daniel learning to live like a normal teenager, eating regular meals, sleeping in a real bed, even starting tutoring sessions to prepare for returning to school. James had hired an educational consultant who assessed Daniel's knowledge and found he was actually quite bright, just lacking formal education for the past 8 months. Margaret grew stronger each day. Her dementia still clouded her mind sometimes, but Daniel learned to be patient during those moments, to gently guide her back when she got lost in memories. He was starting to believe this might actually last. Then Catherine came back. It started with a letter, delivered by courier. James opened it at breakfast, his expression darkening as he read. "What is it?" Daniel asked, a knot forming in his stomach. James set the letter down carefully. "It's from your aunt's lawyer. She's returned from London. She wants to meet with us." Daniel's fork clattered to his plate. "No, no, I don't want to see her." "I know, but legally, we have to respond. She's still your guardian on paper. She left me." Daniel's voice rose, panic flooding through him. "She dumped me and disappeared for 3 years." "I know," James said calmly, "and we're going to fight this, but we need to be smart about it." The meeting was set for 3 days later at a lawyer's office downtown. Daniel barely slept the nights leading up to it, his old fears roaring back to life. What if Catherine had the legal right to take him back? What if the courts sided with her, because she was blood family? What if everything with James and Margaret had just been temporary after all? When the day arrived, Daniel dressed in the one suit James had bought him, though his hands shook so badly, he could barely tie the tie. James had to help him, his movements patient and steady. "Whatever happens in there," James said, "remember that I'm on your side. Margaret's on your side. We're not giving up on you." Daniel nodded, not trusting his voice. The lawyer's office was all glass and steel, high above the city. They were led into a conference room, where Catherine was already waiting. She looked exactly as Daniel remembered, tall, impeccably dressed in an expensive suit. But her eyes were harder than he remembered, calculating as they swept over him. "Daniel," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, "you've grown." He said nothing. "Miss Hayes," James said coldly, "shall we get to the point?" Catherine's lawyer, a sharp-faced man in his 50s, spoke up. "My client has returned from London, and wishes to resume her guardianship of her nephew. She has secured housing here in New York and stable employment." "How convenient," James said dryly. "And where was this stability 3 years ago when she abandoned him?" "I did not abandon him," Catherine said, her voice clipped. "I placed him in state care because I could not provide for him at that time. That's responsible, not abandonment." "Responsible," Daniel found his voice, anger overriding fear. "You didn't visit once, you didn't call, you didn't send letters, or birthday cards or anything. You forgot I existed." Catherine's mask cracked slightly. "I was building a life, Daniel. I had to prioritize yourself," Daniel finished. "You prioritized yourself, like you always did." "That's enough," her lawyer interjected. "Miss Hayes is here now, ready to fulfill her obligations, and legally, she has every right to custody." James's lawyer, Rebecca Ortiz, leaned forward. "Legally, abandonment is grounds for terminating guardianship. Miss Hayes left a 12-year-old boy in a group home for nearly 3 years without contact. That's textbook abandonment. That's a matter of interpretation." "It's a matter of fact," Rebecca cut him off, "and I have documentation. Social worker reports showing no visits, no phone calls, no contact whatsoever." financial records showing she didn't contribute a single dollar to his care. This is open and shut abandonment. Catherine's face flushed. I want my nephew back. That's why I'm here. Why now? James asked, his voice like ice. Why not 6 months ago, a year ago? Why return right when his story hits the news, when everyone knows about the boy who saved a billionaire's mother? The implications hung in the air. Catherine's lawyer shifted uncomfortably. My client timing is irrelevant. It's completely relevant, Rebecca said. She shows up only after Daniel becomes essentially famous. That's not maternal instinct. That's opportunism. How dare you? Catherine hissed. How dare you? James shot back, his composure finally cracking. You threw him away. He lived on the streets because of you. He scrounged for food, slept under a bridge, and you didn't care. Now you want him back because it looks good. Because you think you can profit from his story. He's my blood. Blood means nothing. James's voice echoed through the conference room. My mother has dementia. She barely knows her own name half the time. But she knows Daniel. She knows he saved her life. She knows he's good and kind and brave. That means more than any blood relation. Catherine stood, her chair scraping back. I will see you in court, Mr. Cartwright. And when a judge hears that you're keeping a child from his legal guardian, we'll see who wins. She stormed out, her lawyer scrambling to follow. In the silence that followed, Daniel sat frozen, his chest tight. James turned to him. Are you okay? Daniel shook his head. She's going to take me away. The court will side with her because she's family, and I'll have to go back. No, James said firmly. That's not going to happen. You can't promise that. I can promise that I will fight with everything I have. Money, lawyers, influence, whatever it takes. Rebecca gathered her papers. He's right, Daniel. We have a strong case. Abandonment, neglect, and the fact that you're thriving now. A judge will see that. But Daniel had learned not to trust the system. He had learned that adults made promises they couldn't keep, that the world didn't care about kids like him. That night, he lay awake in his room, staring at the ceiling. He heard a soft knock, and James entered. Can't sleep? James asked. She's going to win, Daniel whispered. I know she is. James sat on the edge of the bed. Why do you think that? Because that's how it always goes. The system protects adults, not kids. And she's my blood family, so they'll give her another chance, and I'll have to go back. What if I told you I won't let that happen? You keep saying that, but you might not have a choice. James was quiet for a moment. Then he said, when I was younger, my father told me something I've never forgotten. He said, the world doesn't reward good people, it rewards determined people. You know what that means? Daniel shook his head. It means being good isn't enough. You have to be willing to fight for what's right. And I am willing to fight, Daniel, for you, for as long as it takes. But what if you lose? Then we'll appeal. And if we lose again, we'll appeal again. We'll fight until there's nothing left to fight with. James met his eyes. You saved my mother's life. You think I'm going to just hand you over to someone who threw you away? Not a chance. Daniel felt tears burn his eyes. I don't want to go back to her. I don't want to go back to being nothing. You are not nothing, James said fiercely. Don't ever say that again. You are brave and compassionate and good, and you deserve people who see that. Daniel couldn't hold back the tears anymore. They spilled down his cheeks, and James pulled him into a hug, holding him while he cried. It's okay, James murmured. Let it out. You've been strong for too long. When Daniel finally pulled back, wiping his eyes, James said, get some sleep. We have a fight ahead of us, and you're going to need your strength. After James left, Daniel lay back down. The fear was still there, coiled tight in his chest, but underneath it was something else. Hope, fragile, uncertain, but real. The first court hearing was set for 3 weeks later. In that time, Rebecca worked tirelessly, building their case. She interviewed Daniel extensively, contacted the social workers at Riverside, gathered financial records, showing Catherine's complete lack of support. She also arranged for Daniel to see a therapist, Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a kind woman in her 50s, who specialized in trauma and abandonment. At first, Daniel resisted. I don't need therapy, he told James.
"I'm fine, humor me," James said. "It'll help our case." So Daniel went, and to his surprise, talking to Dr. Mitchell actually did help. She didn't judge him. She didn't treat him like a problem to be solved. She just listened. "Tell me about your parents," she said in their first session. Daniel hadn't talked about them in years, but something about Dr. Mitchell's gentle demeanor made it easier. "They were good people," he said quietly. "My dad worked construction. My mom was a teacher's aide. We didn't have a lot of money, but we were happy." "What do you remember most about them?" "Saturday mornings, my dad would make pancakes, and my mom would read to us while we ate. She did all the voices from the books, made them funny. I remember laughing a lot." "That sounds wonderful." It was. Daniel's voice cracked. "Then they were gone, and everything was different." "Different how?" "Catherine, my aunt, she took me in, but she didn't want me, I could tell. She acted like I was this huge burden, like she was doing me this massive favor by letting me exist in her apartment. She barely talked to me, and when she did, it was to criticize. I was too loud, too messy, too much trouble. That must have been very painful. I thought if I was really good, if I didn't cause problems, maybe she'd start to like me. But it didn't matter. She was just waiting for an excuse to get rid of me." Dr. Mitchell took notes. "And when she left you at Riverside, she said it was for my own good, said I needed structures and peer interaction. But I knew the truth. She didn't want me anymore." "How did that make you feel? Like I was disposable? Like I didn't matter to anyone?" The sessions continued weekly. Daniel talked about Riverside, about the older boys who stole and bullied, about the staff who looked through him like he was invisible. He talked about his decision to leave, about living under the bridge, about the constant fear and hunger. And he talked about finding Margaret. "Something changed that day," he told Dr. Mitchell. "I saw her sitting there, and I couldn't walk by. I knew what it felt like to be invisible, and I couldn't let her feel that way." "That shows tremendous empathy, Daniel. I just gave her a sandwich. You gave her dignity. That's much more important." Meanwhile, Catherine's side wasn't idle. Her lawyer filed motion after motion, painting James as a wealthy man trying to buy a child, portraying Catherine as a reformed guardian who had learned from her mistakes. The press picked up the story. Headlines screamed, "Billionaire versus Aunt, the battle for a homeless teen, and who gets Daniel?" The custody fight gripping New York. Daniel hated every second of it. Cameras followed them whenever they left the house. Reporters shouted questions. Strangers on the internet debated whether James was a hero, or whether Catherine deserved a second chance. The attention made him feel exposed, vulnerable. He started staying inside more, avoiding windows, jumping at unexpected noises. "They're going to turn this into a circus," he told Margaret one afternoon. She was having a good day, her mind clear and focused. "Let them," she said calmly. "The truth is on our side. The truth doesn't always win. It does when you have people fighting for it." She took his hand. "James won't give up, Daniel. Neither will I. We're family now." The word family still felt foreign to him, like a language he was only beginning to learn. The night before the hearing, Daniel couldn't eat. His stomach was in knots, his hands shaking. James found him sitting in the dark in his room, staring out the window. "You ready?" James asked. "No, me neither." James sat beside him. "But we're going to walk in there tomorrow, and we're going to tell the truth. That's all we can do. What if it's not enough? Then we appeal." "But I have faith in the system, Daniel. Not because it's perfect, it's not, but because Rebecca's brilliant, because our case is strong, and because any reasonable judge will see that you belong here."
"I want to believe that, then try, even if it's just for tonight." The next morning they dressed in suits and drove to the courthouse in Lower Manhattan. Reporters swarmed the steps, cameras flashing. James's security team created a barrier, but Daniel could still hear the shouted questions. "Daniel, do you want to stay with the Cartwrights?" "Catherine, why did you abandon your nephew, Mr. Cartwright? Are you trying to buy this boy?" Inside, the courtroom was formal and intimidating. Wood-paneled walls, high ceilings, the judge's bench elevated above everyone else. Daniel sat at the defense table with James and Rebecca, his hands clenched in his lap. Across the aisle, Catherine sat with her lawyer, her expression composed but her eyes sharp. The judge entered. Judge Patricia Morrison, a woman in her 60s with gray hair and a stern but fair demeanor. Everyone rose. "Be seated," she said. "We're here today regarding the custody of Daniel James Hayes, currently aged 15. Miss Hayes seeks to regain custody. Mr. Cartwright seeks to become legal guardian. Let's begin." Catherine's lawyer stood. "Your Honor, my client acknowledges mistakes were made in the past. However, she has returned to New York, secured employment and housing, and is ready to provide a stable home for her nephew. Blood family should be given priority." "Blood family," Rebecca interrupted, standing, "that abandoned a 12-year-old boy for nearly 3 years. Your Honor, I have documentation." She approached the bench with a thick folder. "Social worker reports from Riverside Youth Home showing 0 visits, 0 phone calls, 0 contact of any kind. Financial records showing Miss Hayes contributed nothing to Daniel's care. Letters from Riverside staff stating Daniel expressed feelings of abandonment and rejection." Judge Morrison reviewed the documents, her expression unreadable. Catherine's lawyer tried to recover. "My client was building a life, while her nephew was sleeping under a bridge." Rebecca's voice was sharp. "Your Honor, Daniel ran away from Riverside 8 months ago because it was unsafe. He lived on the streets, scavenging for food, working illegal jobs just to survive." "And where was Miss Hayes during this time?" "In London, living comfortably, making no effort to find him." "We didn't know he had run away," Catherine's lawyer protested. "You didn't know because you didn't check," Rebecca shot back. "Not once in 8 months did Miss Hayes contact Riverside to ask about her nephew. That's not family, that's negligence." Judge Morrison raised her hand. "I'd like to hear from Daniel." Daniel's heart stopped. He looked at James, who nodded encouragingly. Slowly, Daniel stood and walked to the witness stand. He was sworn in, his voice barely audible. Rebecca approached gently. "Daniel, I know this is difficult, but I need you to tell the judge about your relationship with your aunt." Daniel swallowed hard. She took me in after my parents died. I was 9. At first I thought maybe things would be okay, but she didn't really want me there. She made that clear." "How so?" "She barely talked to me. When she did, it was to tell me I was being too loud or making too much of a mess. She acted like I was this huge inconvenience. I tried to be good, tried to stay out of her way, but nothing I did was ever enough." "And when she left you at Riverside, she said she had a job opportunity in London, that she couldn't take me, that the home would be better for me." Daniel's voice hardened. "But she promised she'd visit. She promised she'd stay in touch." "She didn't, not once." "How did that make you feel?" "Like I didn't matter. Like I was something she could just throw away when I became inconvenient." Catherine's lawyer stood. "Objection, Your Honor. The witness is characterizing." "I'll allow it," Judge Morrison said. "This is relevant to his emotional state. Continue." Rebecca nodded. "Daniel, why did you leave Riverside?" "Because it wasn't safe. Older kids would steal from you, hurt you if you didn't do what they said. The staff didn't care. They were just collecting paychecks. I figured I had a better chance on my own." "And where did you go?" "Under the Manhattan Bridge. I found a spot that was dry, out of the wind. I got work where I could, washing dishes, bussing tables. I made enough to eat to survive." "And that's where you met Mrs. Cartwright?" "Yes, she was sitting against a pillar, barely conscious. I could tell she'd been there a while, that people had just walked past her. I couldn't," his voice broke. "I couldn't just leave her there." "Why not?" "Because I know what it's like when nobody stops. When you're invisible and nobody cares if you live or die." I couldn't let her feel that way. The courtroom was silent. Rebecca turned to the judge. "Your Honor, this young man survived abandonment, neglect and homelessness. He did so with grace and compassion, and when he finally found someone who saw him, who valued him, Miss Hayes suddenly reappears. Not because she cares about Daniel, but because his story made headlines. That's not guardianship. That's opportunism." Catherine's lawyer stood. "Your Honor, my client made mistakes, but she's his aunt, his only living relative. Family should be given priority." "Family," Judge Morrison said quietly, "is not just biology. It's care. It's commitment. It's being there when a child needs you." She looked at Catherine. "Miss Hayes, why should I give you custody when you weren't there for nearly 3 years?" Catherine stood, her voice tight. "I was trying to build a better life, Your Honor. I thought, You thought abandoning a traumatized child in a group home was acceptable. The judge's tone was sharp. You didn't visit, you didn't call, you didn't contribute financially. And when he ran away and lived on the streets for 8 months, you didn't even know. How is that acceptable? Catherine faltered. I made mistakes, but I want to make amends. Amends don't erase trauma, Miss Hayes. Judge Morrison turned to Daniel. Young man, where do you want to live? Daniel's voice was clear and firm. With James and Margaret. They're my family now. The judge nodded. This court will recess for deliberation. I'll issue my ruling within 48 hours. The gavel struck, and it was over. For now, the 48 hours felt like 48 years. Daniel couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't focus on anything except the waiting. What if the judge sided with Catherine? What if blood really did matter more than anything else? James did his best to keep him distracted. They watched movies, played chess, talked about anything except the case. Margaret sat with Daniel in the afternoons, holding his hand, telling him stories about James as a boy. He was stubborn even then, she said with a smile. Once he decided something, nothing could change his mind. He gets that from his father. What was his dad like? Daniel asked. Strong, principled. He built his business from nothing, just like James did. But he always said the most important thing wasn't money, it was character. She squeezed Daniel's hand. You have character, Daniel. That's why James fights for you. On the second day Rebecca called. The judge wants to see us. Noon tomorrow. Daniel's stomach dropped. Tomorrow. The answer would come tomorrow. That night he couldn't sleep at all. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, running through every possible outcome. At 3 in the morning he heard a soft knock. James entered quietly. You awake? Yeah. James sat on the edge of the bed. I couldn't sleep either. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then James said, whatever happens tomorrow, I want you to know something. You changed my life, Daniel. Before I met you, I was so focused on work, on building wealth, on success, I barely saw my own mother. Then you showed me what really matters. Not money, not power, but human connection, compassion. You saved my mother's life, but in a way you saved mine too. Daniel's throat tightened. I didn't do anything special. Yes, you did. You stopped. When everyone else walked by, you stopped. That's extraordinary. What if the judge doesn't see it that way? Then we appeal, and if that doesn't work, we appeal again. We keep fighting until we win. But what if? No what ifs, James said firmly. We're going to think positively. We're going to walk in there tomorrow with our heads high, and we're going to trust that justice will prevail. Daniel nodded, not fully believing it, but drawing strength from James's certainty. The next morning, they dressed in their best clothes and drove to the courthouse. The press was waiting again, but Daniel barely noticed them. His entire focus was on the next hour, on what the judge would say. In the courtroom, Judge Morrison entered and everyone rose. She carried a folder, and her expression was serious. Please be seated, she said. I've reviewed all the evidence, the testimonies, and the reports from social services and Dr. Mitchell. This has been a complex case, but the law is clear on certain points. Daniel's heart pounded so hard, he thought it might burst. Miss Hayes, the judge began, you abandoned your nephew when he was 12 years old. You placed him in a group home and had zero contact for nearly 3 years. You contributed nothing financially. You didn't check on his well-being. When he ran away and lived on the streets, you were unaware because you made no effort to stay informed. Catherine's face paled. The law is clear that abandonment is grounds for terminating parental rights and guardianship, and in this case, the abandonment is undeniable. Judge Morrison's voice was firm. Furthermore, Daniel has thrived under Mr. Cartwright's care. He's attending tutoring, seeing a therapist, and by all accounts is finally healing from years of trauma. She looked directly at Daniel. Young man, you showed remarkable courage and compassion when you helped Mrs. Cartwright. You deserve a family that will show you the same compassion. She turned back to the full courtroom. Therefore, this court terminates Miss Catherine Hayes's guardianship effective immediately. Furthermore, I am granting full legal guardianship to Mr. James Cartwright, pending final home studies and background checks, which I expect to be a formality. The gavel struck. Daniel couldn't breathe, he couldn't move.
The words echoed in his head, granting full legal guardianship to Mr. James Cartwright. James pulled him into a tight hug. "You're staying," he whispered fiercely. "You're staying." Daniel buried his face in James's shoulder and let the tears come. Tears of relief, of joy, of finally being safe. Rebecca was smiling, gathering her papers. Across the aisle, Catherine stood abruptly, her face twisted with anger, but her lawyer held her back, speaking to her in low, urgent tones. Margaret, who had been sitting in the gallery, made her way forward with her cane, her eyes bright with tears. "My angel," she said, cupping Daniel's face, "you're ours now, forever." Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed, but James's security team kept them at bay. James made a brief statement. "Justice was served today. Daniel is where he belongs, with people who love him and will protect him. That's all I have to say." In the car ride home, Daniel sat between James and Margaret, still dazed. It didn't feel real yet. The relief was so overwhelming, it almost felt like pain. "Are you okay?" James asked. Daniel nodded slowly. I can't believe it's over." "It's over," James confirmed. "You're safe now. Legally, officially safe." That night they had a quiet celebration at home. Mrs. Lopez made Daniel's favorite dinner, spaghetti and meatballs, garlic bread, chocolate cake for dessert. It was simple, but it felt momentous. After dinner, James handed Daniel a small box. "What's this?" Daniel asked. "Open it." Inside was a silver watch, elegant but not flashy. On the back was an engraving. "To Daniel, who taught us what family really means." James and Margaret. Daniel's vision blurred. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," Margaret said softly. "Just know that you're loved, that you matter, that you're home." Daniel looked around at the dining room, at James and Margaret, and Mrs. Lopez, at the warm light, and the comfortable furniture, and the sense of safety that filled every corner. "I'm home," he repeated, testing the words. They felt true. For the first time in 6 years they felt true. The months that followed were the most stable of Daniel's life since his parents died. There were still hard days, nights when he woke from nightmares about the bridge, moments when he flinched at loud noises, times when the old fear crept back, whispering that this couldn't last. But James and Margaret were patient. They didn't push him. They let him heal at his own pace. In September, Daniel enrolled in a private high school in Manhattan. James had wanted him to have the best education possible, and while Daniel felt intimidated at first by the wealthy students and the rigorous curriculum, he soon discovered something. He was smart, really smart. Years of survival had taught him to think quickly, to solve problems, to adapt. Those skills translated to academics. Within a few months, he was near the top of his class. He made friends slowly. Most of the students came from wealthy families, their biggest problems being which college to attend, or which luxury car they wanted for their 16th birthday. They couldn't relate to Daniel's experiences, and he couldn't relate to theirs. But he found his people in unexpected places. There was Marcus, whose single mother worked 3 jobs to afford tuition. There was Elena, whose family had immigrated from Ecuador, with nothing. There was Jordan, who had been in foster care, until his adoptive parents took him in. They understood struggle. They understood what it meant to fight for every opportunity. Daniel also continued seeing Dr. Mitchell. In their sessions they worked through his trauma, his abandonment issues, his lingering guilt over his parents' death. "I keep thinking I could have done something," he admitted one day. "If I had been in the car with them, maybe I could have warned them, or you would have died too." Dr. Mitchell said gently, "Daniel, you were 9 years old. There was nothing you could have done. I know that logically, but it doesn't feel true. Trauma doesn't respond to logic. It responds to healing, and healing takes time." At home, life settled into comfortable routines. Daniel would do homework at the kitchen island while Mrs. Lopez cooked, telling him stories about her grandchildren. He'd play chess with James in the evenings, their conversations ranging from school to philosophy to James's business, and he'd sit with Margaret, reading to her when her mind was clear, holding her hand when it wasn't. "You're a good boy, Daniel," she'd say often. "I'm so glad God brought you to us." "I'm glad too," he'd reply, and he meant it. In December, James officially completed the adoption process, not just guardianship, full adoption. Daniel's last name became Cartwright, Daniel James Cartwright. It felt strange at first, signing his new name on school papers, seeing it on his student ID, but it also felt right, like he finally belonged to something, to someone. For Christmas, James asked Daniel what he wanted. "I don't need anything," Daniel said. "I have everything already." But James persisted, and Daniel finally admitted, "I'd like to do something for other kids. Kids like I was." James smiled. "What did you have in mind?" Together they founded a non-profit organization called the Last Sandwich Foundation. Its mission was to provide resources for homeless youth, food, shelter, job training, educational support. They partnered with existing organizations, funded new programs, and created safe spaces where kids could go for help without judgment. Daniel became the face of the foundation, telling his story at fundraisers, speaking at schools, appearing on local news. It was uncomfortable at first, exposing his past like that, but when he saw the impact, when he met kids who said his story gave them hope, it became worth it. One afternoon in March, Daniel was walking home from school when he saw a kid, maybe 13, sitting on the steps of a closed store, shivering in a too-thin jacket. Daniel stopped. The old instinct kicked in, the one that said don't walk by. "Hey," he said gently, "you okay?" The kid looked up, suspicious. "I'm fine." "You look cold." "I'm fine," he repeated, but his teeth were chattering. Daniel sat down beside him, keeping some distance so the kid wouldn't feel threatened. "I used to sleep under the Manhattan Bridge. I know what it's like." The kid's suspicion faded slightly. Yeah, it's hard out here. You got a place to go." The kid shook his head. Daniel pulled out his phone. "There's a shelter about 6 blocks from here. It's safe, I promise. They've got food, beds, people who actually care. I can walk you there if you want." The kid hesitated, then nodded. As they walked, Daniel told him about the Last Sandwich Foundation, about the resources available, about how things could get better. "Did things get better for you?" the kid asked. Daniel smiled. "Yeah, they really did." He walked the kid to the shelter, made sure he was settled, and gave the staff his contact information, in case the kid needed anything else. On the walk home, Daniel felt something shift inside him. For so long, his survival had been about just getting through each day. But now it was about something bigger, about helping others survive, about creating the support system he never had. That night at dinner, he told James and Margaret about the kid. "I want to do more," he said. "Not just fundraising or giving speeches. I want to actually help kids on the street, connect them with resources, show them there's a way out." James nodded thoughtfully. "We could create an outreach program, train volunteers to do what you did today. Could I help train them? I know what works and what doesn't." "I think that's an excellent idea." Margaret reached across the table, squeezing Daniel's hand. "You're turning your pain into purpose." "That's beautiful, Daniel." Over the following months, the outreach program grew. Daniel trained volunteers, went on weekly rounds through areas where homeless youth congregated, built relationships with kids who were suspicious of help. He didn't save everyone. Some kids weren't ready. Some disappeared before he could help them. But every kid he did reach felt like a victory. On his 16th birthday, James and Margaret threw him a party. Not a big flashy affair. Daniel didn't want that. Just a small gathering with his new friends, Mrs. Lopez, Rebecca Ortiz, Dr. Mitchell, and the staff from the Last Sandwich Foundation. As Daniel looked around the room at all these people who cared about him, who had invested in him, who believed in him, he felt overwhelmed with gratitude. James stood to give a toast. "A year and a half ago, I got a phone call from a scared 15-year-old who had found my mother dying on the street. That call changed everything. Daniel, you saved my mother's life, but you also saved mine. You reminded me what really matters in this world. Not wealth, not power, but compassion. The willingness to stop when everyone else walks by." He raised his glass. "To Daniel, the bravest, kindest person I know. Happy birthday, son." "Son." The word landed in Daniel's chest like a warm stone. "Thank you," Daniel said, his voice thick. "All of you. I spent years thinking I didn't matter, that I was invisible. But you all showed me that's not true. You saw me, and because you saw me, I learned to see others." He looked at James and Margaret. "You gave me a home, but more than that, you gave me hope. You taught me that family isn't just about blood, it's about choice, it's about showing up, it's about staying. Margaret wiped tears from her eyes. We're so proud of you, Angel. Later that night, after everyone had gone home, Daniel stood at his bedroom window, looking out at the city. Somewhere out there, kids were sleeping under bridges, in doorways, in abandoned buildings. Kids who felt invisible, forgotten, discarded, but they weren't invisible to him. And tomorrow he'd go back out there. He'd keep looking. He'd keep stopping, because that's what you did when you remembered what it felt like to be unseen. You made sure nobody else felt that way ever again. 2 years later, Daniel stood at a podium in front of 500 people. At 18, he had grown into himself, tall, confident, no longer the frightened kid who had lived under a bridge, but he hadn't forgotten that kid. He carried him everywhere. When I was 15, Daniel began, his voice steady. I lived under the Manhattan Bridge. I washed dishes for cash, slept on cardboard, and went days without a real meal. I was invisible. People walked past me like I didn't exist, and I started to believe it, that I didn't matter, that my life had no value. The ballroom was silent, every eye on him. Then one October morning, I saw an old woman slumped against a concrete pillar. She was dying, and I had a choice: keep walking, or stop. I stopped. I gave her my sandwich, my water, my warmth. I called her son. That decision changed my life. He looked toward the front table where James and Margaret sat, both beaming with pride. James and Margaret Cartwright didn't just take me in, they saw me, they fought for me. They taught me that family isn't about biology, it's about showing up, about staying, about choosing each other every single day. He paused, letting his words sink in. Over the past 2 years, the Last Sandwich Foundation has helped over 800 homeless youth in New York City. We've provided food, shelter, job training, and educational support. We've reunited families, we've saved lives. Applause erupted, but Daniel raised his hand. But we can't stop here. Right now, there are thousands of kids on the streets of this city, kids who feel invisible, kids who think nobody cares. I'm here to tell you, and them, that's not true. We see you, we care, and we're not walking by. The applause was deafening. People stood, and Daniel felt the weight of their belief in him, in the mission, in the possibility of change. After the gala, as guests mingled and donations poured in, Daniel stepped outside for air. The April evening was mild, the city humming with its usual energy. James joined him. You did great in there. Thanks. It still feels weird public speaking. You're a natural. People connect with you because your story is real. You're not some rich person playing savior. You lived it. That matters. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment. Then James said, I've been thinking. You're 18 now, heading to college in the fall. You're going to have a lot on your plate. Daniel's chest tightened. Was this it? Was James suggesting he pull back from the foundation? I want to make you the foundation's co-director, James continued. Equal say in all decisions. It's your vision, Daniel. It should be your organization. Daniel stared at him. Are you serious? Completely. You've earned it. I'm 18. I don't have experience. You have more experience than anyone else, James interrupted. You know what these kids need because you were one of them. That's more valuable than any business degree. Daniel felt emotion rising in his throat. I don't know what to say. Say yes. Yes, Daniel said, smiling. Definitely yes. In August, Daniel moved into his dorm at Columbia University. He had been accepted with a full scholarship, planning to study social work and nonprofit management. The foundation would continue operating, with Daniel handling outreach and programs, while James managed the business side. Margaret's health had declined over the past year. The dementia was progressing, and she spent most days in a wheelchair, her moments of clarity becoming rarer. But she still knew Daniel. On his last night before leaving for college, he sat with her in the library. She was awake but quiet, her hand resting in his. I'm going to miss you, he said softly. She smiled faintly. You're not leaving, you're growing. That's different. I'll visit every weekend. I know you will. Her grip tightened slightly. Daniel, do you remember that day under the bridge? Every detail. That was the day God answered my prayer. I had been praying for an angel, and he sent you. Daniel's eyes burned. You saved me too, you know. You and James, you gave me a reason to believe in good things again. You are a good thing, she whispered. Never forget that. At Columbia, Daniel thrived. He joined student organizations focused on homelessness and social justice. He continued his outreach work, now training college volunteers. He maintained straight A's while managing his responsibilities at the foundation, and he never forgot where he came from. Once a month, he returned to the Manhattan Bridge, standing at the spot where he had lived for 8 months. It kept him grounded, reminded him why he did this work. One cold November evening during his freshman year, he was walking near campus when he saw a girl, maybe 16, sitting in a doorway. She was shivering, her thin jacket inadequate for the weather. Daniel stopped. The old instinct, the one that had saved Margaret, that had started everything. "Hey," he said gently, "you okay?" She looked up, her eyes wary. "I'm fine." He recognized the lie. He had told it himself 1,000 times. "I'm Daniel. I run an organization that helps kids in your situation. No strings, no judgment, just help if you want it." She studied him, clearly trying to decide if he was trustworthy. "I used to sleep under the Manhattan Bridge," he said. "I know what it's like. The fear, the hunger, the feeling like nobody sees you. I see you." Something in her expression cracked. "I ran away from foster care. They'll just send me back." "Not if you don't want to go. We have resources, lawyers who can help, but first, let's get you somewhere warm. Have you eaten today?" She shook her head. "Come on. There's a diner 2 blocks from here, my treat. We can talk about options." She hesitated, then stood. "Okay, over burgers and fries." She told him her story. Her name was Riley. She had been in foster care since she was 11, bouncing between homes, never staying anywhere long enough to feel safe. Her last placement had been with a family who treated her like free labor, so she ran. "I get it," Daniel said. "I really do. The system failed you. But there are people who care, who want to help. You just have to let them." "How do I know I can trust you?" He pulled out his phone, showing her the foundation's website, news articles about his story, testimonials from kids they had helped. "I'm not asking you to trust me completely, but trust me enough to let me connect you with resources. A safe place to sleep tonight, a hot meal, someone to talk to about your options. That's all. One step at a time."
Riley nodded slowly. "Okay, one step." Daniel called the foundation's emergency line, and within an hour Riley was placed in a short-term shelter with counselors who specialized in foster care cases. As he left, she caught his arm. "Why did you stop?" she asked. "Most people don't." Daniel smiled sadly. "Because someone stopped for me once, and it saved my life." Over the next few months Daniel checked in on Riley regularly. She eventually agreed to meet with a lawyer who helped her file for emancipation. She got her GED, enrolled in community college, and started working part-time at a bookstore. "You changed my life," she told Daniel one afternoon. Over coffee. "You changed your own life," he corrected. "I just showed you it was possible." In December of his freshman year, Margaret passed away peacefully in her sleep. Daniel was devastated. She had been his anchor, his reminder that good people existed, that love didn't have conditions. At the funeral, Daniel gave the eulogy. "Margaret Cartwright saved my life," he began, his voice breaking. "Not because she gave me a home or because she fought for me, though she did both those things. She saved me because she saw me. When I was invisible to everyone else, she saw me. She called me her angel, but she was mine." He looked at James, who was crying quietly. "She taught me that family is built on love and choice, not blood. That kindness is the most powerful force in the world. That one person caring can change everything." After the funeral, James pulled Daniel aside. "She loved you like a grandson. I hope you know that." "I do. And I loved her like a grandmother." They stood together in the cemetery, two people bound not by blood but by something stronger, by choice, by gratitude, by the transformative power of compassion. In the spring of his sophomore year, Daniel was invited to speak at the United Nations Youth Assembly. His topic, "The Invisible Children, Addressing Youth Homelessness in Urban Centers." As he stood before delegates from dozens of countries, Daniel felt the full weight of how far he had come. From sleeping under a bridge to addressing world leaders. From invisible to heard. "Homelessness is not a choice," he told the assembly. "It's a failure. A failure of systems, of support, of compassion. Every homeless child represents a moment when we as a society looked away. but it doesn't have to be that way. He shared statistics, success stories from the foundation, policy recommendations. But he also shared something more important: humanity. These kids aren't statistics, they're not problems to be solved. They're human beings who deserve dignity, safety, and hope. And all it takes is one person who refuses to walk by, who stops and says, "I see you, you matter." That's how we change the world. One act of kindness at a time. The applause was thunderous. That summer Daniel organized a massive outreach initiative called the Last Sandwich Project. For 1 week, 500 volunteers spread across New York City, connecting with homeless youth, providing resources, creating pathways to stability. They helped 147 kids that week. 147 lives touched, redirected, given hope. On the final night, Daniel returned to the Manhattan Bridge one last time. He stood at his old spot, remembering the scared 15-year-old who had lived here, who had thought his life didn't matter. "We did it," he whispered to that boy. "We made it matter." James appeared beside him, having followed quietly. "You okay?" "Yeah." Daniel smiled. "I'm good, really good. Your mother would be proud, your biological mother." Daniel nodded. "I like to think she is, and my dad. And Margaret, they are. I know they are." They walked back to the car together, leaving the bridge behind. But Daniel carried its lessons with him, the lesson that one sandwich could save a life, that stopping mattered, that compassion could transform the world. 5 years later, Daniel stood in James's study, now decorated with awards and photos documenting the foundation's impact. Over 3,000 kids helped, 15 new shelters opened, partnerships with schools, hospitals, and government agencies. But the number that mattered most to Daniel was one. Every single kid was one life changed, one person who now knew they mattered. James entered, carrying 2 glasses of whiskey, celebrating, remembering. Daniel took a glass. "It's been 7 years since I found Margaret. 7 years since you saved her, since you saved us both." They toasted silently. "I've been thinking," Daniel said, "about everything that happened. How one moment changed everything. That's the power of choice. You chose to stop. Everything else flowed from that. I almost didn't, you know. I almost kept walking. I was so tired, so hungry. Part of me wanted to just take care of myself for once. But you didn't. No. Because I remembered how it felt to be invisible, and I couldn't let her feel that way." James set his glass down, his expression serious. "Daniel, I need to tell you something. When you first called me that day, when you said you'd found my mother, I didn't believe you. I thought it was a scam. I almost hung up." Daniel blinked in surprise, but something in your voice, the fear, the desperation, the genuine concern, made me listen, made me come. And that decision changed my life. James's voice thickened. "You gave me my mother back. You gave me 2 more years with her, years I wouldn't have had. I can never repay that." "You already did," Daniel said quietly. "You gave me a home, a family, a future. We're even." James smiled. "We're not even, we're family. That's better." They stood at the window, looking out at the city that had nearly destroyed Daniel, but had ultimately become the place where he learned his purpose. "What's next?" James asked. "You're finishing your master's degree soon. Big plans." "I want to expand the foundation nationally. There are kids in every city who need help. I want to build a network, train people to do what I do, create a movement." "That's ambitious." "I learned from the best." James laughed. "All right, let's do it. Together." They shook hands, sealing the commitment. That night, Daniel returned to his apartment. A modest place in Brooklyn, nothing fancy. He could afford better now, but extravagance felt wrong when kids were still sleeping on streets. He sat at his desk, opening his laptop to write. He had been working on a memoir, telling his story, hoping it would inspire others. He titled the last chapter, "The Last Sandwich." "I used to think my life didn't matter," he wrote, "that I was invisible, disposable, forgotten. But I learned something under that bridge, something that changed everything. Everyone matters, every single person. And sometimes all it takes is one act of kindness, one sandwich, one moment of seeing someone, to save a life." I stopped for Margaret because I remembered what it felt like when nobody stopped for me, and that decision, that simple choice not to walk by, created a ripple effect I never could have imagined. Today thousands of kids have been helped because I stopped that day. Families have been reunited, lives have been saved,
Hope has been restored, but it started with one sandwich, one moment, one choice. So I'm asking you, who are you walking by? Who have you made invisible? What would happen if you stopped? Because the truth is, we're all connected. Every homeless kid, every struggling adult, every person society has forgotten. They're us, we're them. And when we help them, we help ourselves. We become more human, more compassionate, more whole. Don't walk by. Stop, see people, offer your sandwich, your time, your attention. You might just save a life. You might just save your own. He saved the document, closed his laptop, and looked at the photo on his desk, him, James, and Margaret at his college graduation. Margaret had been frail that day, her mind foggy, but she had smiled when they handed him his diploma. She had whispered, "I'm so proud of you, my angel." "I'm proud of us," he whispered back to the photo. "We did good, didn't we?" In his heart he felt her answer, "You did more than good, Daniel. You showed the world what love looks like." And that, he realized, was enough, more than enough. It was everything.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.